Anyway, but it's great to be here with Nani, of course, who I've known for a long time, and with two people who I admire and respect for a lot of the work that they've done. Massachusetts has a long history with this subject that we're talking about. In fact, Lemuel Shattuck, an interesting character in his own right, is usually known as the father of public health. Brahmin Yankee who didn't like immigrants but went into the Irish slums of Roxbury back in the 1850s, 60s and did what I guess we'd call a blockbuster report on conditions there. 13 people to a room and horrible, horrible conditions. And we named the Shattuck Hospital for him, but he's the guy that really first led the way in government involvement in what we call public health. In conditions of sanitation, minimum standards of fitness for human habitation, all that kind of stuff, which started here with Shattuck and then gradually expanded all over the country. These days, every state has a health department, a public health department, that does public health in that sense. Calvin Coolidge, as a candidate for lieutenant governor in 1916 in Massachusetts, proposed universal health insurance for people of the Commonwealth. Most folks don't know that. Essentially an employer-based system, and he was simply following Theodore Roosevelt's advocacy for the same thing in the 1912 presidential campaign, but people kind of think of Coolidge as a weird guy who never talked. In point of fact, he was a rather progressive Republican, both as Senate President and as Lieutenant Governor and subsequently Governor. And in 1916 he proposed universal health insurance, and we've had lots of things ever since, including the bill that I signed in 1988, which unfortunately was not implemented by my successor and his Secretary of Health and Human Services. His name happens to be Baker, but I just wanted to throw that in.
Not to hold any grudges.
In any event, be that as it may, as I think all of you know, it was Mitt Romney who began the process, to his credit, of saying, in effect, look, we're spending a ton of money on this stuff. Maybe you ought to try to pull people together and see if we can come up with something that, the maximum extent possible, uses a lot of this money in a way that will provide universal or near universal health care for the people of Massachusetts. And had some good people working for him. And they went out, brought a lot of us into the process, and came up with something. I mean, at the 11th hour, he kind of scooted away from it a little bit, but no question that he's the guy that got the thing going. And by the way, was really eloquent on the subject of why you had to have an individual mandate if you were going to have a system that worked. To his credit. I don't know how it goes for him in the campaign trail, given that kind of accuracy, but I think he was right then, and he's still right about what you got to do if you're going to do this. And it's not, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that the Massachusetts plan, as it finally emerged in 2006, was the model for what came out of the Garners, for better or for worse, including this connector thing, which every state is now mandated to create, or if it doesn't do it, I guess the feds will do it for them. It's called an exchange in the bill, but it's essentially the Massachusetts connector. And we're very fortunate to have a couple of people who know a lot about that. John, of course, who was the founding guy. He was the first executive director, and has nothing to do with putting it together, and I suspect is out telling a lot of other states how to do it these days, right?
Yep.
And Jim, who runs a conservative, highly respected think tank research institute, which does very good work and has, I think it's fair to say, influenced a good deal of policy making for the better at the state level. I don't always agree with them, but I admire and respect the kind of research they do, and whatever they do is always food for thought, and so on. Anyway, let's kick it off with John, then go to Jim. Maybe 10, 15 minutes max. Is that okay?
Sure.
For each of you, and then we'll open it up and have a good discussion. That makes sense. So, John, you're right.
Thank you. So politically, actually, I ought to be in the center, and you should be on my left.
There has been a migration in news too.
That's your point of view, you know.
Thank you for that lovely introduction, Nani. And